What's going on all you gamers? Here we are back with some more Outriders, and today I'm going to be showing you the full build guide for this fella right here. He looks a little bit like an astronaut at the moment, probably not the best Star Wars, but if you're after a Devastator and you're after one that does a lot of CC and is really fun in the co-op group, then this may be the build for you. That's coming up next. Welcome back all you guys and girls. As always, for all things gaming, for all things Xbox, then why not hit that subscribe and bell icon. I'll bring you all the latest and greatest in content, hints, tips, guides, builds, and just some fun gameplay from all the latest and greatest games. Now this fella right here, he's a little bit different. I've not seen anyone create anything like this, and the build I was going to go for, because I'm a little bit late to the Devastator game, when I looked it up on YouTube, pretty much 1 million people had already gone for it. So I tried to do something that's a little bit different. So this fella right here, you can adapt him, you can change him a little bit, and you can use him, and I would definitely recommend him in a co-op group. He's not going to do as much damage as some of the other classes, but he will group everything up. He will make sure everything stays in place. He will make sure that those really strong builds, such as the Technomancer, or at the moment obviously you've got the Phaser Beam Pyro, they're able to just hit more and clear faster, because everything stood still or grouped up for them. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to chuck on a little bit of footage, and hopefully you can tell what kind of playstyle this guy's got, and after that I'm going to go over the full build guide. Right, so hopefully from that you can kind of tell this guy is really good at keeping mobs in place. If you're after a team build, this guy is exceptional. Really fun, does a bit of damage, but more than anything, he's just a really good overall group player. Right, so his overall stats are not too much firepower, pretty good for the anomaly power to be perfectly honest at 147k, nice bit of health, and of course a big chunk of armour. The gun that we're using, and the main one for this build, is Absolute Zero. So with this, what it actually does, it's tier 3 mod, ultimate freezing bullets, shots inflict freeze on enemies. Now if you've used freeze in this game, you'll know it's really good for those smaller adds. It just makes sure that everything is stuck in place. And what I've done, I've chucked on Winter's Blast with this. Critical shots create an icy blast that inflicts freeze on enemies within a 4 meter radius. Now it's only got a 1 second cooldown, meaning this is one of the best mods for kind of keeping things in place as long as you're getting a bit of crit, which you definitely will. Nice and fun, and everything is frozen with this gun how it's modded out at the moment. Now next up, and if you can, remember this is an epic build, so if you haven't got this you don't have to, but if you have got it, it does work in your favour, as with pretty much all builds. So right here we've got a funeral pyre. If you've got a death shield, it works exactly the same. You're going to have a gun in this secondary that's got Shadow Comet and Fortress on it. Shadow Comet. Shots call down a comet dealing 210,003 damage to enemies within a 3.5 meter radius with a 3-second cooldown. This is just one of my favourite mods in the game, so good, looks good, does great air effect and just great damage overall. Next up, and we've got Fortress. Receive up to 43% damage bonus based on your armour. At endgame, that's 43% on everything. Really good, and on anomaly builds, you pretty much have to have this in most circumstances. It just means you're going to hit like an absolute truck, and it's probably the best in slot for pretty much any anomaly build out there. Next up, and for the handgun, I've gone with Torment and Agony. The main reason for this, it comes with clipped combustion. That, along with moaning winds, means that you're going to empty it at the start, and then as you go on through it, whenever you want to swap over to it, so for example doing this, as soon as I actually empty it, it's going to do that big explosion. Now because we've swapped off so fast, as long as we wait 8 seconds, once you go back to it, you're going to go straight back and do this. Another explosion. Really nice, good area effect damage and really good for killing all of those frozen or stood still enemies. Now if you've been a member of my channel for a while, you know I'm main a Pyro. However, I have made this guy and he is a lot of fun, but I haven't got the best gear, so I'm going to tell you what you would want to swap out if you can grab the mods. Now with these pieces, what you're going to aim for is anomaly power, cooldown reduction and status power on as much as you can. If you can get that on every piece, that is absolutely perfect. For this first one, we've got a tier 1 Blood Shock. Earthquake inflicts bleed on enemies damaged by the skill. Next up, we've got Captain Hunter, meaning that you're going to hit the elites a little bit harder because you've got 25% extra damage against them. Just down here, and we've got a tier 3 is Wide Horizons. Now if you can't put this on your build, don't worry, because like I said, this is a kind of making your way to CT15s or clearing CT15 with friends. So if you can put this on, that's perfect. I will chuck in the bottom any tier 3 mods where you actually get them, but this one's really nice because it just means you're able to pull a few more enemies in, meaning that your team can nuke them a lot faster, and yourself, you can hit them a lot easier with your earthquakes because everything's grouped together. Next up, you've got Bloody Boost. Boost your damage against enemies afflicted with bleed by 15%. If you can, there's one out there that's a tier 3 that will give you 25%, meaning you'll do even more damage. Next up, and we've got this one. Now this first one is down to your choice. If you're staying alive perfectly, you may well be able to just chuck this straight off, and that's Armor Boost. Earthquake grants you 4,974 points of armor for each enemy affected by the skill and lasts for 8 seconds, stacking up to 10 times. It just makes you tanky. If you're worrying about your survivability, which with this character you honestly don't have to too much, you may well be able to swap this out, see how you get on. But this one right here will mean you have so much physical damage reduction, once I can speak, that you don't really have to worry about too much except for the kind of air effects going off underneath your feet a little bit. Other than that, you've got Freezing Boost. Boost your damage against enemies afflicted by freeze by 15%. Now, I'm not 100% sure, but as far as I'm aware, the Technomancer can get a tier 3 mod that gives 25%. So if you've got that or you're able to collect it, it may well be worth chucking that on your build. That will mean you'll hit everything really hard after applying this right here and chucking Frozen on everything. So next up for the gloves, we've got Earthquake. You have to have this on, it's where you're going to get a big chunk of your damage. Increase your skill's base damage by 84,001. Now you've only got 2 of these in this build, but I am going to tell you, you probably should put the tier 3 mod on that will give you 3 if you can. Next up, you've got Earth's Legacy. Earthquake increases the skills range by 60%. Now I didn't think this was integral at first. After playing with it, playing without it, you pretty much have to have this on, I would say, all Earthquake builds. Take it with a pinch of salt. I haven't played as much as some people, but I think you probably will have to have this on. If you're going for that Earthquake, you will have to have the extended range. Last but definitely not least is this one right here. Earthquake. The skill can be activated one more time before triggering the cooldown. Now you've got 2 of them, meaning you're going to do a lot more damage. It just works out really nice, especially when everything's mobbed together, frozen in place, or just grabbed from that endless mass. Now lastly, the very last one, we've got Untamed Power. Using skills deals 44,084 damage to enemies within a 5 meter radius around you. The damage is equal to 30% of your anomaly power. Now this mod is good, however it is nowhere near as good as on a Pyromancer Akari build. You just don't have anywhere near as much anomaly power going into your build no matter what mod you put in place, so it's a good mod to have when you're playing close range. It is not amazing. I would say if you can, I was unfortunate and couldn't roll this one out, but if you can, try to get this tier 3 mod somewhere in your build, and that's this one just here, Second Quake. Earthquake, the skill can be activated one more time before triggering the cooldown. This will mean you have 3 of them. That for me will work out a lot better than actually putting on the Untamed Power in this build. So if you have this, make sure you chuck this on because it will work out in your favour. You'll be able to do a lot more damage to a lot more people and you'll just get a lot more kills and actually help the team out quite a bit more if you have this. If you haven't, stick with what I've got until you have found this, or chuck on something else if you find that better. Also, if you wanted to take out that armour one that I was talking about earlier, chuck on something such as this. Claws inflicts vulnerable on all enemies hit with your melee skills, or maybe grab yourself a little bit of extra kind of anomaly power going into your build somewhere with power assimilation, or anything that will give you some kind of extra anomaly power. It's down to your preference, see how your survivability is, but you may well want to swap that one out as well. Right, so for your rotation, your main survivability is obviously going to be coming from your golem. When you hit that, you're going to make sure that you're kind of surviving everything, even though without it you are still really tanky. Also, when you press this, you are going to get a surge of anomaly power, meaning that you get a lot of extra damage from your skills. What you're going to do is come over to your endless mass, and whenever there's absolutely loads of the smaller enemies, you're going to hit them with this. It means it's going to group everyone up. It's going to make it much easier for you to hit afterwards with your absolute zero, meaning everything will, after it's had this done to them, also be frozen in place. Really nice and fun for a lot of people to play with because they're just going to absolutely melt everything afterwards. Like I said, if you're playing with a phaser beam pyro, or if you're playing with anyone else that has got a really nice kind of clear effect, they're going to melt everything. Also, one thing to note, this doesn't work on some of the enemies. It's mainly the elites. I think it's just ones with the skulls and such, or the bosses. So don't try to focus on any of the bigger ads, go for the smaller ones and group everything up from there. Next up, what you're going to do is you're going to go over to your Earthquake. Once everything's frozen in place, or once everything's dragged into place, hit them with your Earthquake. You're going to absolutely tear through them and mean that they get bleed damage on top of that. What you can do, if you have actually got, like I said, if you've got a Death Shield, or if you've got something with Fortress, if you swap over to that secondary before you hit these Earthquakes, you will do a lot more damage. If you haven't, don't worry, just stick with the absolute zero, or any gun that can actually freeze things in place. I would say if you haven't got absolute zero, you could very well swap it out for a gun with maybe something like Snow Squall on, meaning when you actually reload you're going to freeze them. It's completely your choice, but absolute zero works best for crowd control. Lastly, if you still need to hit them, you can very well swap over to your handgun that you've emptied just before you've gone into the actual area, and then what you're going to do is just switch over to it just to get that air effect from Moaning Winds and Clip Combustion if you need to hit enemies for a little bit more damage. Then switch straight back to your primary. Right, so I'm going to guess this is probably quite a standard skill tree, but I'm going to explain it anyway, and that's Anomaly Power, so you're going to put that up by 6% just here with your Anomaly Reservoir. Just over here, and you're going to have cooldown on your main skill, which you'll be using, which is your Earthquake. Just down here, and you're going to increase your Anomaly Power by 6%. Just up here, we're going to make sure that we go and get 15% cooldown on our golem effect, because if we can have that as low as possible, it works in our favour, means we're going to survive pretty much everything. Just over here, after using class melee skill, increases resistance piercing by 15% for each hit enemy for 10 seconds, meaning whenever you're in the mix of everything, whenever there's lots of ads around you, say for example you froze them in place or endless massed them very close to yourself, throw a melee in there. It's going to mean they get hit a lot harder when you hit them with your skills afterwards, such as your Earthquake. Just down here, and we've got using protection skills, increases anomaly power by 45% for 10 seconds. Like I said, you're going to be using your kind of golem effect as much as possible, meaning you've got that proc of 45% extra anomaly power very, very often. Next up, you've got a little bit more resistance piercing with pure anomaly. Just over here, you've got increase your anomaly power by 6%. Just down here, reduce seismic skills cooldown by 15%. Like I said, that's going to be your main source of damage, will be coming from your earthquakes. Making sure that everything else is kind of stuck in place is your role, it's your job to make sure everyone can clear things fast, but you also want to dish out a bit of damage. For myself, if I could put on that third earthquake, I definitely would. Next up, we've got Anomaly Reservoir, meaning you get an extra 6% on your anomaly power. Now next up, and we've got Strong Arm of the Law. Now I put this in because I found myself meleeing things quite a lot due to having this one over here. If you find yourself not doing it quite as much, then what you want to do is probably spec it just over here to get yourself the extra 30% more bleed damage. Next up, we're going to go with Executioner, increases damage by 20% against enemies below 30% of health. That's just always worth having in pretty much any build you can chuck on, and like I said, you're not going to be hitting the hardest with this build, so having that will really help against those big tough enemies. Next up, you've got Anomaly Reservoir again, meaning you get an extra 6% anomaly power. Just down here, and this is the thing that's going to keep you alive more than anything else, Bloodbath. Bleed afflicted on enemies deals 30% more damage, which brings you over to this. Like I said, keeping you alive, you are healed for 25% of your bleed damage. So again, if you're struggling to stay alive, spec out of maybe that one and chuck it over to this one just to get a bit more health regen. Next up, and we've got Rejuvenation, increases your skill leech by 6%. Just over here, increase your armor bonus by 40% of your anomaly power. That's a constant, so that's why you had so much armor at the start. Just over here, increase armor by 20% and resistance by 20% for 10 seconds whenever your skills end. This is really good because with enough cooldown, it means your earthquakes are pretty much always going to be at, meaning you're going to have that up always, meaning you're not going to fall over to the really big skill moves, such as the Brood Mother's Area Effect and such. Next up, another resistance piercing just here, and finally just over here, increases your seismic skill base damage by 50%. Make sure you get this, otherwise you will be hitting like an absolute wet sponge. Right, so as you can see, I am still gearing up, but I found this build to be really fun when playing in co-op. You can use it to make your way through the tiers, you can use it at endgame, as long as you're with people to kind of hit a little bit hard on yourself, because you are not going to be winning any damage records with this build, but you will still hold your own, you'll do a bit of damage, but the main thing you're going to do is be a support class and make sure that everything is in an area that people can actually hit and kind of wipe out really fast and easy. What you could do is probably put this into the seismic commander set as well, so if you have those legendary pieces and you want to go for a CC role, you very well could adapt it and change it around a little bit to make something similar to this, but that will hit a lot harder. Right, well you guys and girls, as always, for all things gaming, for all things Xbox, take care, I'll see you on the next day.